We've all heard the story. The Great Library of Alexandria, a beacon of human knowledge, consumed by a single catastrophic fire. A tragedy that plunged the Western world into 1,000 years of darkness. It's a powerful, simple story, but it's a myth. The truth is far more sinister, and in many ways, far more tragic. The loss of classical knowledge wasn't the work of one knight, one army, or one madman with a torch. It was a slow, grinding death by 1,000 cuts. A story not of a single fire, but of a slow, chilling fade to black. Our story begins not with an ending, but with a beginning in the 3rd century BC. The city of Alexandria, Egypt, was the brainchild of Alexander the Great, but it was King Ptolemaic who gave it a soul. He envisioned a new kind of institution in Mouseion, a temple to the Muses, and at its heart was the Great Library. Imagine it, a complex more Silicon Valley than Silent Library, a university, a research institute, and a repository of all the world's knowledge. The Ptolemies were obsessed with collection. They had a simple and somewhat ruthless policy. Every ship that docked in Alexandria was searched for scrolls. If one was found, it was taken to the library, copied by a legion of scribes, and the copy was returned to the owner. The original stayed. They borrowed the entire official works of Sophocles, Euripides, and Aeschylus from Athens, forfeiting a massive silver deposit to keep the originals and send back the copies. This was knowledge as a national treasure. And what knowledge it was. Within these halls, Euclid wrote the Elements, the foundation of geometry for the next 2 millennia. Eratosthenes calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, using little more than sticks, shadows, and brilliant reasoning. Herophilus pioneered human dissection and discovered the nervous system. For a few glorious centuries, Alexandria was the intellectual engine of the planet. But empires are fragile, and knowledge is often the first casualty of power. The first of our 1,000 cuts came not from a foreign invader, but from within. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar was embroiled in a civil war and found himself trapped in Alexandria. In a desperate military maneuver, he set fire to his own ships in the harbor. The fire, ancient sources like Plutarch and Cassius Dio tell us, spread to the city and accidentally burned a warehouse district near the docks, which contained a vast storage depot of scrolls destined for, or perhaps even from, the library. This was a terrible blow, but it was not the end of the library itself. The main complex, the Mouseion, survived. The institution limped on, but a precedent was set. Knowledge was flammable. It was collateral damage. The next cut was deeper, more ideological. As the Roman Empire Christianized, knowledge that conflicted with the new orthodoxy became suspect. In 391 AD, the Christian Emperor Theodosius I issued a decree banning pagan rites. Theophilus, the Patriarch of Alexandria, seized upon this. He led a mob that attacked and destroyed the Serapeum, a magnificent temple that housed a daughter library of the main Mouseion. The destruction was deliberate, a symbolic smashing of the old world. The main library was likely already in decline, a shadow of its former self, but this was a targeted strike against the intellectual tradition it represented. And then, silence. The final cut wasn't a bang, but a whimper. There is no grand historical account of the library's final closure. The most likely culprit was simple, brutal economics. The Mouseion and its library were state-funded institutions. As the Roman Empire crumbled, as funds dried up, the salaries for the scholars stopped. The maintenance of the papyrus scrolls, which decayed in the humid climate and were eaten by insects, was abandoned. The scribes found other work. The Great Library didn't burn down. It was evicted. It died of neglect. So where did all that knowledge go? This is the real tragedy. For centuries, the knowledge of the Greeks was preserved, not in the West, but in the East. In the great Islamic centers of learning like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, scholars translated and expanded upon the works of Aristotle, Galen, and Ptolemy. They were the guardians of the flame. The real loss for Europe happened centuries later, as these Islamic empires themselves faced fragmentation and invasion, like the Mongol sack of Baghdad in 1258. The streams of knowledge that had been preserved began to dry up. The West, fragmented and intellectually isolated, had simply lost touch with its own inheritance. The slow fade was complete. The works of the great thinkers weren't burned in a single pyre. They were forgotten, one crumbling scroll at a time. The library's demise wasn't an event. It was a process of shifting priorities, of budget cuts, of religious fervor, and of the simple, brutal fact that preserving knowledge requires a conscious, continuous, and costly effort. When that effort stops, the darkness doesn't fall. It slowly, inexorably creeps in. The echo of that silence would shape the next 1,000 years. It's a legacy that asks us an uncomfortable question. In our own digital age, with our own vast libraries of data, are we building something for the ages, or are we just creating new, more fragile ways to forget? If you enjoy uncovering the lost chapters of history, the real stories behind the myths, then subscribe to the channel. We have so many more forgotten tales to tell. Thanks for watching.